Welcome to Hell of a Pitcher. I'm just Andrew, and I'm one half of your hosts, bringing some of my my Kenergy this week.
Absolutely.
And I'm sitting across the internet, as I always do, from the Ken to my Barbie. Mr. David Hollingshurst.
That metaphor
How you doing,
might
buddy?
need some retooling. I'm okay. We'll tinker with our sort of relationship metaphor, but I'm happy to be here and very happy to talk about Barbie with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, for those not watching on YouTube, we're both kind of, bringing our most Ken shirts we have. I'm all pink shades. Dave, you have a nice
I got two cans.
bird shirt.
Yeah, two cans. Yeah, it's very summery. Admittedly, you have always been the more stylish one of our duo, and you have proven that once again today. Looking real cool, looking real. You know what? I'm going to say you look like the kind of guy who doesn't put his weights back at the gym. That's what you look like here today. You leave the plates on the rack.
Ooh.
You're looking like a real bro. So good on you. You've really embraced the role.
I'm bringing, lots of pink, man. The pink is where it's at.
Well, pink is a fabulous color. Fabulous color.
And it is a fabulous color, and it's certainly what made. With Barbie, that's what we're talking about today. Pink is quite important, but we'll get into that as we go. As we said, we're talking about Barbie. We finished up with Oppenheimer last week. We finished up our Nolan trilogy. We're into some Greta Gerwig right now, and fittingly talking about Barbie this week after Oppenheimer. Oh,
yeah.
We have a
Barbie fan in the background. I'm gonna do something about that real quickly here. Hang on, bear with me.
So as David puts away his cat, who's obviously quite hungry.
No, she just can't abide the idea of a closed door. She hates a closed door. So if there is a room that she cannot access, that is enough to revolt. So what you just witnessed was, or what you just heard, was a closed bedroom door. So it's she's right. She has the right of it. I'm in the wrong here.
Closed doors are the worst.
Closed door policy, not good.
But Barbie, man, let's get into it as we do each week. Let's start with a little bit of a rundown. And Dave, can you give us the rundown on Greta Gerwig's 2023 Barbie?
I certainly can. So Barbie is the story it's the story about the real world, our world, a world which happens to be adjacent to another world called Barbieland. Barbieland is a bright, joyful, pastel paradise where the problems that plague our society, such as misogyny and female oppression, have been eradicated. Barbies of all sorts live a life to its full potential, are doted on by a legion of Kens, and choreographed dance numbers and bespoke songs are a routine thing. It's a place of unending uniformity, but not in race or occupation, but in that no one seems to age or die. Until one day, stereotypical Barbie, played by the inimitable Margot Robbie, begins to question her own mortality and even shows signs of physical defect. My God. To find out why, Barbie must journey to the real world to find the person playing with her and fix her to fix herself. That might be important. She's joined uninvited by Ken, played by ya boy Ryan Gosling, who is very taken by the concept of patriarchy in the real world, a concept which shocks Barbie, as she and all the other Barbies are under the impression that they have saved the real world and that it existed in an idyllic fashion similar to Barbieland, where women can be anything. She's horrified by the real world and tries to set things right with the help of Gloria, the woman playing with her, who is played brilliantly by America Ferrera, and her daughter Sasha. All the while, duplicitous Mattel executives are trying to force Barbie back into the box, and Ken, who has absorbed some truly unfortunate lessons from the real world, has returned to Barbieland and basically installed himself as the ruler of a Kendom. It's a vapid place of ludicrously oversized trucks and Matchbox 20 songs. Barbie, Gloria, and Sasha must save the other Barbies from their fate as ninny-headed beer openers under the Ken regime and return balance to the Force, or whatever. I watched a lot of Star Wars this week. You get the idea. So Barbie was written. Sorry, did you like that?
Man, that was great. Oh, nice. I loved it.
So Barbie was written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. It was directed by Greta Gerwig. It was produced, among others, by Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie. It had a budget of somewhere between $128 and $145 million, and it made a staggering $1.446 billion with a B at the box office. It has a stunning cast, including, of course, as we mentioned, Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, Kate McKinnon, America Ferrera, Simu Liu, Canadian boy, another Canadian boy. There's two of them in this film, at least. And the legend, Will Ferrell. So that is your rundown. If you have not seen Barbie, you are pretty much up to speed there. But I do recommend that you go see Barbie. So pause now, go watch it, come back, we'll talk.
You know, the funny thing is when we both, I don't know if we mentioned this last week, but neither one of us had seen Barbie.
Nope.
That is appalling that I did not see this when it was out in theaters.
Yeah, that's a failing on us.
Did go to Oppenheimer opening weekend. I did not go see Barbie soon after, even though it was, you know, critically acclaimed. It was making tons of money. In my head, I don't know. It's hard for me to get to the theater these days with you know, having two small kids, but you know, even when it dropped on Blu-ray, I was like, oh, I'll get to it. And, and I finally saw it for our podcast this week, and man, oh man, I should have seen this in theaters.
Yeah.
I should have
that would have been a treat.
That
would have been a real treat.
I should have really jumped it. Yeah. So we're going to start this week with, with talking about it in theaters, with talking about how Barbie kind of went up against Oppenheimer, the film we talked about last week, and how this really was, and the film itself, playing with lots of different ideas of feminism, of masculinity, of patriarchy, of, real and perfection, and all these ideas. So, David, where do we want to start today? Because I was gonna start at sort of Oppenheimer, which is a weird place to start for Barbie,
but we're men, so that's what we're gonna do. You know, we're gonna man this up a bit here. Yeah,
obviously.
No, I mean, it's interesting. You know, these films were released together, and they kind of rode a wave together, and people were screening them back to back. The internet was awash in Barbenheimer stuff. And before seeing both movies myself, I thought the pairing was mostly for comedic value. But after watching them in successive weeks, I genuinely feel like they are interesting movies to talk about together. And if I was to do it in one day, as a lot of people did, I would really hope that Barbie was the second screening, because I think it serves as a really great, refreshing, beautiful, audacious palate cleanser to the much more conventional Oppenheimer. Part of the reason I think they go well as contrasting discussion is that Oppenheimer, in a lot of ways, is emblematic of patriarchal film. I mentioned to you last week that I thought Oppenheimer was largely forgettable. And I don't think I knew exactly why at the time, but I do now. And it's because I've seen it before. I've seen Oppenheimer 100 times before, in Lawrence of Arabia, in Patton, in any movie you've ever seen about like a towering male figure he's difficult to work with. He's a maverick, but by God, he gets stuff done. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen it repackaged and resold to us over and over again. And often these movies, probably without realizing it in a lot of cases, they perpetuate a lot of the same ideas where men are concerned and how they're viewed versus how a woman would be viewed in a similar circumstance. And I'm not saying these can't be good movies. I think we can still enjoy them, but I think it behooves us to look at them with a new lens. And I think Barbie challenges us to do that. And after watching Barbie versus watching Oppenheimer, I thought, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this before. I will remember this movie. And when like I mentioned this to you before, I listened to a podcast doc to sort of get up to speed on Oppenheimer last week before we did the show, and I actually found the documentary to be just as interesting as the movie, which tells me that Oppenheimer, the film, is about as interesting as Oppenheimer, the man, and the history. Whereas the interesting thing about Barbie, the movie,
Right.
is the movie. And I wonder, like, what was your experience seeing this coming off of Oppenheimer? Were you able to disentangle them at all? Did you have this sort of this thing where they were where you thought about them as a piece together?
You know what? I love how you called it sort of the great palate cleanser for Oppenheimer. And when I think of palate cleanser, it's like I think about like, you know, contrastly to Oppenheimer, there was like these dark colors, black and white, half the movie's in black and white. There's this grittiness to it, but like the kind of brightness, obviously, in the pink. I mean, there was the idea that, or I read an article, I think back when, that it's like there was a shortage in pink paint in, like, I mean, I don't know if that was just a sort of like a marketing ploy or something, but in Los Angeles where they shot the film, or California, there was this like shortage of pink because they used so much pink. I mean, that's kind of so funny, but there's this idea of, like you said, the palette cleanser, but like just how Gerwig has created this this film, or chosen to take the film in this direction. She has such strong influences throughout the film of, old musicals, Singing in the Rain, Oklahoma. Like, you mentioned these, like Lawrence of Arabia, Patton with Oppenheimer, but there's like this, I would say, strong influence of these sort of, these older films from the 50s that kind of like are these happy dreamlike movies. They're shot on sound stages. All of Barbieland is shot on a sound stage. So they had this like ability to create this world, but have it feel really come to life, even though it's very clearly manufactured, which just plays to the idea of what Barbie is. And you can see there's no water in Barbieland. The backdrops are all kind of like, are all colored, or are all painted, but they all look real. But they're real because they're like physically there, but they're not real in the sense of like what we anticipate it being real.
Which is a really cool tie-in, like, on that level of the movie, with the thematic level of the movie. Like, it just, having these sort of
100%.
These almost simulacrums of things. It really does lend itself to what they're talking about a lot. It's really, really smart. There's no wasted movement in this. Do you know what I mean? Like, everything is important, and I found that really great. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, there's this this feeling of authenticity, but also there's this absurdity of it all, and you're in on it. You're in on the wink wink nudge nudge, right? And it isn't until we sort of get to the real world that we're like, oh wait, this is sort of what this movie is. This is the reality of the real world versus this Barbieland. And I don't know if it's like, I don't want to say no other filmmaker could have made it like this, but like the vision that Greta Gerwig had for this film, and Margot Robbie too, because she was like such an important, vital role to the as a producer, and not just as the star. Like, it is so brilliant, the direction they took it in. And when we think about a Barbie movie, this movie had been in production for like, I don't know, like 15 years.
Yeah.
Like 2009, I think. Like, and it had gone through so many different people attached. Like Diablo Cody like wrote a draft, I think, and Amy Schumer was going to star. And then, there was just like this continuous flow of kind of people writing it. And then Margot Robbie actually got attached as a producer first, and she wanted Gal Gadot as Barbie, who was not available. And and then she kind of was shopping around and whatever, and she was a huge fan of Little Women, Greta Gerwig's second film that she did, and she kind of brought her on screenwrite it, do another kind of screenwrite of it. And that's when Gerwig brought on Noah Baumbach, her husband, who's done Squid and the Whale, did Frances Ha with, co-wrote that with Greta Gerwig. He did Marriage Story more recently. He's a great writer, great filmmaker. And they sort of wrote it over the pandemic and was sort of like getting this idea of, there's a quote that she said, embracing mortality and sadness and sickness and everything that it means to be human. That's sort of at the base of the film.
Certainly, yeah.
Being in lockdown and sort of what that means. But yeah, I think for me, it was a really brilliant sort of look at such a classic, I want to say, like, just figure in the world and culture, like Barbie. It did not feel like how we would envision a Barbie movie to be.
No.
Off the hop. When I think about a Barbie movie, I think about Toy Story and how Barbie is portrayed in Toy Story,
exactly.
Barbie and Ken. And they're fun and they're great and they're like, this like, but it's what's so brilliant about even calling her stereotypical Barbie. It's like, that's how we envision her. And that leads me to sort of getting to our point about wanting to talk about the projection of, or portrayal, I should say, of feminism and female experience and the male experience in this film. You feel that they're obviously contrasting ideas and they're, obviously against one another. But I mean, that is so fully on display for us. I don't think until we get into the real world, and I just sort of mentioned this, but like, so for you, when the film sort of starts and you kind of are, we don't really know what's happening and we're kind of reliving this life. And then she starts it again. And it's sort of like similar. I don't know if you've seen the Lego movie or like the Truman Show or, even, to a lesser degree, like the Matrix, like you're in this sort of fake world, but you don't really know you're in it. And until they cross over in that first scene, the rollerblade scene, which is like
so good,
very, very impactful. What was your thoughts about sort of male experience, female experience, specifically with that scene?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that scene really encapsulated it pretty beautifully and succinctly. And the commentary in this movie, it comes at you fast. Like there's a lot of stuff packed in here. It seems like every line is something, and it could be too much if it wasn't so poignant and hilarious, which is just a credit to Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach and the delivery of all the actors. And one of the best moments is when they're rollerblading and they've crossed over into the real world and they're both dressed in these like howlingly ostentatious outfits. People are staring at them. They're rollerblading on the street in these ludicrous
feels
spandex.
Like something I would wear.
It's not all that dissimilar from what you have on right now. Actually, it's just a lot tighter.
Absolutely.
And as they're going, they're both articulating what they're experiencing in that moment. And it's just so perfectly contrasted as to what they describe. And what they're describing is the very real difference between how a man and a woman can be viewed and responded to when doing the exact same thing. Like they are doing exactly the same thing, wearing the exact same thing.
Yes.
And yet the experience of Barbie versus the experience of Ken, like walking down the street in broad daylight, is totally different. Totally different. They're both beautiful. They're both blonde. They're both decked out in spandex. And yet the response and feeling of Barbie, there's this undercurrent of judgment and, more importantly, danger that accompanies her experience versus Ken's.
Yeah.
And, it's so truthful and so tragic and delivered in such a hilarious way. I was in hysterics at that scene. And I will remember that. I don't know. I take it you felt the same way because I think we both highlighted it very, very pointedly.
What's interesting is when you say, I didn't think about it like that. I thought about it like that, like everything sort of you're saying, like obviously experiencing things differently, experiencing reactions, but I didn't think about them as they're like literally dressed
same
exactly
person.
the
They
same.
are the same person.
They're like dressed like, yeah. And it's like, oh man, like I didn't think about it like that. They're both the same. Like, so it's not like, a man and a woman walking down the street or rollerblading down the street or going and sort of, somebody might feel something about you know what I mean? Like they literally are the same.
They don't have genitals. They don't actually have the
exactly
defining
same.
characteristics of like biological genders that would make them distinctly different. Like they are actually kind of androgynous human, like, you know, human beings. And, you know, and yet their experience is so like when she goes to talk to the construction worker, she's like, I need some female, like, you know, unity. I'm going to go to a construction site. And then they, you know, they catcall her and they hoot and worse. And then she goes and she's like, you know, I don't have genitals, right? And then they're just like, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter. And that was such a wicked commentary. And I think how tragically, you know, some men view the sexual experience. It's all about them. You know, like her you know, Barbie, the woman's involvement or enjoyment is kind of incidental. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? You're an object there for my pleasure. And I thought, like, again, just like wicked commentary coming at you fast and, you know, so concisely. It's brilliant.
I loved the idea of what it really means to be human and like what it means to be a woman or a man sort of in this real world. And it's so obviously it's in your face, but it works so well. Following up that scene is, you know, when Ken kind of goes off and he's like, you know, like, I'm going to be the CEO or I'm going to be a doctor, which was just like, you know, Gosling is like, Pete Gosling this guy is brilliant. He deserved every bit of that Oscar nomination. I don't know if he should have won against Robert Downey Jr., but I mean, you can make a case because he really, I felt like he was just so good in this film. But anyway, I digress. He goes off, she sits down at the bench, and one of these first kind of like really impactful moments for me in the film, like on an emotional level, was when she looks at this old woman on the park bench, and she's just kind of looks at her and she says, "You're beautiful." And I think she says
Barbie says to the woman,
says, "I know." Yeah. And I was just like, oh man, what does that mean? And what is that like? What am I getting from that? That was like one of the first things I looked up after I was done the movie. And it's this woman was Anne Roth, who is a legendary costume designer, and she collaborates a lot with Noah Baumbach.
Oh.
And she has a celebrated body of work across more than 50 years in the industry. And she is like undoubtedly a point of admiration for Greta Gerwig. And this is a quote I pulled, like, she's living proof that no defining line separates fashion from high art, one of the guiding principles for the film's satirical ideas. So it's like, yeah, like that I feel like that's also such a kind of the first sort of notion that it's like what it means to be real and what it means to be authentically you, and how do you become that? And that's where that Barbie sort of starts making that transition, I feel. You know, following up with that, there's the casting of the film, which is like, there's this, obviously everybody's Barbie, everybody's Ken, but there's such this wide variety of actors that kind of, you know, from known people. This is the sort of kind of another kind of thing going against Oppenheimer, was like, we didn't love that it's like, there's like, seems to be like a name in every single role, or this, like, you have like, oh, here's this person in this role and this person in this role. And it's like, we have to get these biggest stars. Like, they're the biggest stars and the biggest names. And it's just like you know, everybody is in this movie.
Yeah.
And like, there are a lot of huge names in this movie, but like all these characters just seem to, or all these Barbies, all these Kens just seem to like fit perfectly in the role that they're given. And they identify are identifying as a variety of different people, right? It doesn't, even though they're all the same, which is kind of a great display, a great casting, I thought. Did you feel like that worked? That kind of idea of casting sort of all these different, even though we have a stereotypical Barbie or an idea of what that is?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I mean, I love the idea of just giving opportunity. You know, it's always exciting and interesting when we get new stars, new faces, new voices, whether they're behind the camera, in front of the camera. Giving more people opportunity yields exciting things. It yields new things. And, there's nothing wrong with loving, having your favorite actors, having your favorite directors, wanting to see them over and over like that. That's cool and all. But you definitely reach a saturation point. And Oppenheimer, man, we were soaked. It was excessive. Like, honestly, like, I mean, do you need Remy Malek there holding, a clipboard? And do you need, did that have to be Casey Affleck? Like, plenty of people, I'm sure, were deserving of these little roles that could have meant a lot to them in their career. And like you say, there are stars in this movie for sure, but there are also a ton of people who I did not recognize, who could have very easily had that place been filled by a known commodity. And yet it was not. And I think that's admirable. And I think there's something in that about giving people opportunity, about giving voice. And I think there's merit in that. But on the subject of casting and on the subject of stars, there is one star who I did want to talk about for sure. It's another Canadian kid, Michael Cera. He's Canadian, right? I'm pretty sure he's from Ontario. But Michael Cera,
is he? I
think he is. I think he might be. Okay. Will you do some quick journalism? I really do want to talk about the Michael Cera character, the Allan, and it's
he's from Brampton.
Brampton. Oh yeah, shout out Brampton. Yeah. Love it. Good old Ontario boy.
Oh, okay.
So your boy Michael Cera, Brampton's own. I found and found this immediately. If I was to identify with anyone in this movie, it's Allan. Like, I feel like I am an Allan. And I kind of hope that most guys watching this movie will identify with Allan more than Ken. Maybe not, but, I kind of hope so. And, Allan he doesn't fit exactly into Barbieland, but he's cool with it, but he's definitely totally revolted by what he sees in the Kingdom. And I found his response to it super relatable in how often I don't know what to do in the face of social issues. His first reaction is to run, basically. Like, he tries to flee the Ken land, which we're all guilty of, so oftentimes, I think, turning away from something we find distasteful rather than confronting it. And his second reaction, when running doesn't work, is to get into a fist fight with a bunch of construction workers. Neither of these things are particularly helpful, but I relate to this idea of not knowing what else to do and just thinking like, well, the only thing I can do to fight this would be to physically fight it. And that doesn't really work when you're confronting ideals or the feelings of a lot of people. It's just totally ineffective. And I don't know if that's a lack of imagination or motivation, but I think we all feel that sort of helplessness and think like, how can I combat this injustice? How can I fight this? And, I think part of that is almost my reaction to it is almost, I feel like maybe some conditioning to a degree. If you think about like your sort of male heroes and icons and stuff like that, the response is usually to find the bad guys and punch them. That's what you do when you are confronted with an issue. And once you've done that, mission accomplished, you get to kiss Barbie and the movie's over. But not only would that not help fighting all the Kens of the world, it's probably impractical since I feel like they're the ones that are most into MMA. But this idea of not knowing what to do, I felt really, really meaningful. I really related to that. And you do get to see it through Margot Robbie's eyes as well. At one point when she's confronted with really the ultimate challenge of the movie, which is to disentangle the Barbies from the Kens towards the end. And she just sits down at one point and she goes, usually I just wait for a more motivated Barbie to do something about this. And I just found that so relatable because that is so often my idea. Yeah. I'm like, you know what? Someone smart is going to take care of this. I don't need to get involved. And that I found really relatable and identifiable in myself. And I really do like it when a movie sort of confronts things in me that I maybe don't like so much about myself. I wish I were more motivated. I wish I were more ambitious to do something about the things that bother me. And I just found that really awesome. And the the Michael Cera character, Allan, I just really, really sort of embodied that for me. What did you think of him?
I loved Allan, and it's just sort of like
he's so lame, but he's just like Allan. he's got no rhythm.
It's amazing. Yeah, he's the best. You know, he is whenever he's in anything, it's always a joy. I love seeing him on camera. He but the representation of masculinity, of male, of patriarchy in the film, I feel like is while it's sort of misogynistic in how, you know, Ken's transition and that's on full display, and he's sort of like this you know, at the end of the movie they're sort of back in their where they belong in Barbieland, but also they also have this sort of a um revelation, I guess, about like, well, does it that actually mean for them? And I like how that sort of is on display. It's not this idea of you know, I read an interesting quote about it, you know, sort of being like a post-feminist um, portrayal or a post-feminist idea where this is from an LA Times article by Jean Guerrero, where she says the film's reception has focused on its messages of women's empowerment, but what makes it a radical story is that it also invites women to reimagine feminism so that doesn't ignore male struggles. And that I thought was an interesting take sort of on how men are depicted. And sort of at the end when Barbie is like, yeah, like we're not getting together, man, but like, who are you? Like,
Yeah.
you got to figure out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not relation to me. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm Ken. And it's, you know, that whole thing. And it's like, it's true. So often I feel like men are, or just, you know, people in general can just be so focused on another person that they sort of forget who they are themselves.
Sure, yeah.
Or don't even know who they are.
I mean, the Kens define themselves by the opinions of the Barbies in this. That's the, like, he says it very specifically. He's like,
exactly.
He's like, I have a good day if Barbie says hi to me. You know, I mean, like that's how he defines his success. And later it comes to be by the objects that he has, the trucks and the fur coat and the big TVs, and then like the way they change Barbieland. So yeah, you're 100% right. There is this, this idea that men are struggling as well. And that needs to be recognized.
Yeah, and it's like I can only look at it through my own eyes as a man, mm-hmm. right? Like I can't. This movie, when it's all said and done, I can enjoy it as much as I can. But this is a movie made by women, and it's made for women, and it's not really made for me. But that doesn't mean I can't watch it or enjoy it. But like, get something from
I
it.
think like, there's a lot in there for you too. And like going back to the Allan thing, you know, I think
100%.
You know, like I think there is this huge section of the male population that doesn't want to be what masculinity has become or has always been. We don't want that. We're as disgusted by what's going on and what has happened as anybody. We just don't know what to do. We honestly don't know what to do. And it, you know, you know, there is a lot here for everyone. This is a movie about us all. I think, even though, as you say, it seems like very much like it is for women by women, but I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think we both certainly took a lot from it, and I think there's a lot to be gained for any man who feels hesitant to watch this. I would say don't watch it, because it might be really, really great for you.
Right. I think what I meant, I agree with you. Kind of said it a lot better than I did. I don't mean that it's not for me and that I can't get something from it, because I've obviously gotten it.
For sure. No, I didn't take. I didn't.
I just meant that I'm not trying to you know, skew it that it's like this is a movie actually all about the male struggle.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to appropriate this this thing, because that would be so classic male.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do.
But the you know, the interest, can't help it. It's in my DNA.
That's right.
I think another interesting sort of idea that the film brings up is, I mean, it's very obvious. It's the idea of, like, you know, authenticity versus reality, or perfection versus reality. And one thing I noticed, I mean, first of all, the costumes in this are incredible.
Beautiful.
And it was nominated for an Oscar. The music was great, but it won an Oscar for for Best Original Song. But then the makeup was also nominated. This was like so great. The one thing I noticed was she, like, I don't know if you saw, like, you see her at the beginning. You're just like, okay, this is what she is. By the end of the movie, she's not wearing makeup. And like, I don't know if you noticed that, or like however she's presented. It's like, I'm like, oh, I was like, I don't think she's wearing makeup. And it's like, she's not. She's like, throughout the movie, she like kind of like her body changes. And like, obviously it's told to us when she's talking about like the flat feet and the cellulite or whatever, but it's also subtle things like how she's dressing and how she's like her makeup and these ideas of what perfection or what it is to be a woman or how you should be presented in the real world, or sorry, how you should be presented versus like what it is actually to be a woman and what it is to live in reality. And, that the idea that the moment that really connected with me towards the end of the film is when the mother figure played by Rhea Perlman sort of approaches her and says like, do you want to actually live in this world? Like, this is like, you just experienced it. Men are running the world. It's pretty shitty. but she's like, but I have to show you. And she kind of grabs her hands and it's like that documentary footage. Like, how did that come across for you? It was like that, those like flashes. And it's like, I was like, oh, that's life. And it's like, there's high points, there's low points, there's sadness, there's happiness, there's death, there's light and there's life. And it was like that part. I mean, as we know, I said during our Interstellar episode, not afraid to cry at a movie. Yeah. I shed a tear during that part. It was like, whoa, that is life. And it's like, this is a movie that's about such an imperfect, well, I guess a perfect, but an unrealistic, I should say, portrayal of what it is to be a woman or a man or anything, a person. Really felt like it hit home what it is actually to be real and be human. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's interesting because, like you say, there's so much in this that juxtaposes authenticity and I guess sort of facades. Like, I mean, that's like this lie of perfection, which is where the Barbies are living. They are living in a very pleasing lie, and you see that not just in their surroundings, but also their mentalities and how they have this delusion, the shared delusion that they've fixed the real world. Like, I mean, they haven't visited the real world. They don't really know what's going on there. They just think that what they've done has changed the world. And I think there's a very real segment of the population that they're sort of talking about there. It's these people who are good people who maybe live in a bit of a delusional state. Like they think that things are fine because their life is fine. Nothing is really fine. If you actually take a moment and get outside of your own little Barbie land and see the real world, you see that it's deeply flawed. It's a tragic place. And yet there's also beauty in it, which I think is what you see, what Barbie comes to realize and what you talk about there. And what moved you so much was this idea of the beauty of imperfection, and that things age and that they die. Yeah. It's that ephemeral quality that gives them meaning. If you just lived in unending day after day, unending beauty and happiness, well, what kind of hell would that be? Like, I mean, really, like it would just be, we see that often. It's been talked about in film, like in Groundhog Day, like, or in Palm Springs and stuff like that, or I'm sure there's myriad other examples, but yeah, to live that way, to live that lie, though it's full of, like they talk about, it's full of choreographed dance numbers and great songs and hair and all this stuff. It's also insincere, and it's Yeah, it's not somewhere that any of us should really live mentally, because it
Yes.
prevents us from actually confronting reality, which needs our help. The real world needs us, much as it needs Barbie. Um, and talking about sort of like reality and the real world, and like you said, one thing that this film does really well is lean into its heightened nature. You talked about the costumes and the set design, and there's this really
Right.
over the top quality, reminiscent, like what you were saying, of some musicals, and it has this heightened sort of sense about it. And it's at a lot of points, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd, and I think that is
Oh
very
yeah.
intentional. It's very over the top, and I think that really serves to illustrate the absurdity of a lot of things in our society, of chauvinism, of sexism, what have you. And when you see the position the Kens are in Barbie society, as we first encounter it, they're
Right.
totally marginalized. They're not given anything important to do. Gosling's job
Yep.
is beach, which is hysterical. I freaking love that.
Oh man, I just wrote that down. I was like, one of the beach.
Yeah.
The brilliant,
Beach.
just so
Yeah,
brilliant.
not lifeguard, beach. Yeah, and they define themselves based on how the Barbies view them, and all these foolish things, that it really are immaterial, or should be immaterial to a person's sense of self-worth. And you think about how ludicrous it is to run a society like that. And then you take a moment, you're like, oh, well, that's exactly what we've been doing for all of recorded history, and beyond, just human history. And it makes this point so perfectly that what we are doing now is no less absurd than what you're seeing on film with all these elaborate trappings and bright colors. And we are just as silly. And yeah, I mean, I've always marveled at like just the impracticality of chauvinism. And that's really on full display here, that when you do that, you sacrifice half your capacity for everything. And if you're all Barbie or you're all Ken, you're missing out on the best we can be. Our full potential is not realized if any side is dominant over the other. You need a collaborative, harmonious kind of world. And that's really one of the things that I most keenly took from this movie, was that all Barbie is no good, all Ken is no good. You need Barbie and Ken to collaborate and work together. And yeah, I mean, I think I might have got off from your original question there, but it's that was
No, the idea that, like you said, the absurdity of it all, I think, is even on display, not just in our characters as like they're portrayed, but also just like, the idea of who is making this movie. And it's absurd that like Mattel is producing the film, and they are pretty much like the bad guys in the movie. When they first sort of sent the script, or presented it this way, Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie had to sort of be like, listen, this is the way we're going to do it, or we're not doing it at all. Because Mattel were like, wait a minute, we don't really love this.
Yeah.
They don't love that they were the Will Ferrell. It's like, you have to understand. But then it's like the satirical aspect of that, of them being so absurd, and it's like, this men dominating every role. It's like, where's the woman in charge? Yes, but where's the woman in charge? It's like, well, you can call me mother. Like,
yeah, that's right.
It's like so absurd and ridiculous. Yeah. And he's like,
but so real, so real. Like
all the men are running this. Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of what she's saying. And it's like, but she's also very much aware that it's like, also, and this is kind of towards the end of the movie, when it's like, can we just make, America Ferrera's character, the real woman, she says, can we just make a real Barbie? Like, can we just make one that's like, she sort of says all the things. And then, this Will Ferrell says like, oh, absolutely not. But then the kind of his lackey says, well, actually, that looks like our projections. That could make a lot of money.
Yeah.
He's like, well, do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, at the end of the day, for them, for him, for Mattel, for the people, it's like, it's the exact conversation that Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie had with the people at Mattel, the executive producers who, went to them and said, they were like, whoa, well, we can't do this movie where we're the bad guys. We're Mattel, like, we can't do that. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, but this is the way we're going to do it. It's going to make a shit ton of money. Well, if it's going to make us a lot of money, then exactly. Like, all right, now we're talking.
Yeah, someone might want to give Mattel some credit for this. Or like, oh, look at their sort of awareness and self-examination. And it's like, no, it was probably still just self-interest. And I think, there's this new wave of corporate ethics that is really just,
oh man,
it's just, it's opportunistic. There's a profit to be made, so we will pay lip service to these things that people think are important in order to sell them stuff. And there's a real awareness from the filmmakers here to be like, we got to make this movie our way, but probably only because some dude decided it could make a lot of money. And the awareness doesn't stop there. There's that moment near the end where Gloria makes that never speech, when she's describing the paradoxical kind of way that women are expected to behave. Never you got to do this, but don't do that. Never do this, and do that. And it's a really well delivered speech. And then Margot Robbie, the stereotypical Barbie, sort of summarizes it. And then the daughter yells out, "Way to go, white savior Barbie!" And she's just like, "No, like your mom said it. Your mom said it." And it was sort of this nod from the filmmakers to be like, we still had to have a white woman in the lead role for this. Like, we're still not at the point where this Barbie could have been played by anyone other than a beautiful blonde woman. And it's just a really smart self-awareness that they tip their cap to on a number of occasions without being too pleased with itself. You know what I mean? Movies can be like really sort of happy and sort of smelling themselves. They're like, see what we did there? You see what we did? But this movie doesn't do that.
They
sorry, go ahead.
They say that in the part with the narrator where she referenced
right.
that it's
you
Margot
shouldn't have gotten Margot Robbie together. Yeah, if you really wanted this to be about every woman or something like that. Yeah,
like she's like obviously.
Yeah, I mean she's
and it's like we're aware.
Yeah,
who the is being cast as Barbie. It's like the self-awareness is just like on point.
Yeah, Margot Robbie is almost like mythically beautiful. You know what I mean? Like it's just like she almost seems exactly. She almost seems like an impossibility to exist. That's how sort of beautiful she is. So in a way, it is the perfect character, the perfect person to play this character. And in other ways, you can see why maybe there's some irony to it. But either way, it's fabulous.
She is such a great actor as well,
man.
And there, there's some interesting. I don't want to get into the backlash of the film. I don't think we need to go down that kind of chasm. I think we can touch on things that maybe didn't work for us so much. But one thing I will sort of touch on was like, everybody's sort of talking about this Oscar thing, and everybody was kind of up in arms about. It got a bunch of Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, but Greta Gerwig didn't get a Academy Award nomination for Best Director,
which is a travesty as far as I'm concerned.
And there was, it's interesting. It got 8 Academy Award nominations, and Margot Robbie didn't win for best actor. Or for best leading actor for whatever
female actor in a leading role, I think is what we're going for.
Yes. Just like God, what am I saying?
It is funny though. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that there was sort of this big backlash, and I really loved what Greta Gerwig sort of said about it. Ryan Gosling was asked a ton about it, and he was sort of like, it is sort of like they should have been, in so many words, should have been nominated. I wish they were, sort of thing. The interesting thing was Greta Gerwig, when they sort of asked her, it's like, like you weren't nominated for Best Director, like, well, like why, like weren't you nominated or whatever, and she was like, well, I was nominated because it got a Best Picture nomination. You know what I mean? Like she was sort of like, I did get a nomination because she's one of the producers of the film, right? Like didn't get a Best Director, but she did get a a best, like the best film.
Right.
Like she was, I guess, I don't know. She wasn't, I guess she wasn't, maybe she was a producer. I don't know. Anyway, but she was like, it did get nominated.
Yeah.
She's like, we're up for the best picture. Like she sort of like took, the back seat. People sort of were like, how could Christopher Nolan get nominated? And, Martin Scorsese and Jonathan, and like, I don't know. Like I look at all those, I've seen all the movies that were nominated, except for, and I haven't seen all the movies. Sorry, I haven't seen any of them.
Well, this changes everything.
Rambling nonsense. But there was this, I guess my point was like, people were like, it's like all man dominated or whatever. And then like, forget to Justine Triet, I guess. She was nominated for Anatomy of a Fall, which from everything I've heard is this incredible film. And I don't know. I think sometimes people put too much stock in the Oscar nominations, really. Here I am talking about them, rambling on about it. But
well, I mean, it is.
But I think she was certainly deserving. But
absolutely, I think so. And I mean, there is something tragic and it's unfortunately predictable, but also ironic that in a movie like this, the guy, it's really Ryan Gosling who has gotten the most buzz from it. Yeah, I mean, that was actually more of what I heard about this movie than anything before seeing it, was just how great Gosling was. And he got to do the song at the Oscars. He did win Best Supporting Actor, did he not? No, he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Yeah.
No,
but honestly, I think the Downey Jr. performance was fine. But like, what kind of a role was that? Like, it wasn't challenging at all. Like, I actually don't see the distinction between the role he played in Oppenheimer and him playing Tony Stark for a decade. I see it as about as much of a reach for him as an actor. Whereas this character, I thought, was like, this was a challenging role to do. And I'm not saying Downey Jr. was bad. I just think this was a more deserving performance of acknowledgement because it's different from something we've seen. I've seen the Downey Jr. thing a million times. Like it's the same thing with Oppenheimer. I've seen Oppenheimer before. I've seen that Downey Jr. performance before from other people. It doesn't wow me at this point. I just sort of, I don't know. Gosling's was different. I think it deserved it. But there is an irony that he's the one that you hear about, after a movie like this. And it sort of shows you that a lot of these things, these biases are still very strong in our society.
It's sort of, I don't know. It's tough. Like you said, there's been a lot of positive movement, I guess, in sort of Oscars, Academy Awards, and like, it being sort of an old boys club. Now there's like this move towards, even just like younger members and members of like, from all over the world. You can kind of see that a lot in the nominations, which is like you said, is a good thing. But I feel like she should have been nominated for this. She's Greta Gerwig, that is. But I don't know. I feel like there's this is what the Oscars sort of does sometimes. It already predetermines what's going to be the Oscar for this year, sort of thing, right? And it was Oppenheimer. Yeah. And
unsurprising, but disappointing.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah. I mean, I still kind of stand behind Oppenheimer, I think, but
which again is fine. Like, you shouldn't be made to feel bad for liking the things that you like, but I do think it's important to sort of look at it critically and be like, acknowledge what it is in a lot of ways, and maybe the flaws in the whole apparatus. But I'm not going to rip on someone for liking because I liked Oppenheimer. I enjoyed Oppenheimer, but not to the extent of that you did. All
right. So is there any other things that didn't quite work for you? I know that wasn't anything that really didn't work. No. It was just the fact that it wasn't, I felt like she didn't get her due flowers enough. And like, Greta Gerwig is such a great filmmaker and writer. And like, I feel like it's gonna happen, but like, people could make the case that like, Nolan should have won for another movie or should have. And I mean, the whole joke about Scorsese, like, how long did it take him to get his first and only Oscar?
Yeah.
You know, it took him, he made like how many bangers?
Yeah, decades worth.
And like Departed, like on the hierarchy of Scorsese movies, like, I don't know. I love Departed, but like, is it better than Taxi Driver? Is it better than Raging Bull? Is it better than Goodfellas? Like, I don't know. You can make an argument, right, that it's not.
Sure.
And, you know, somehow that's his best director. But again, it depends on the year, and it depends on who they're up against, and yada yada.
And sometimes you get these lifetime achievement awards. Basically, you know, it's like, hey, you've been doing this a long time, you haven't gotten one.
I guess that's the point that I'm making,
which is fine, I guess. But it's unfortunate that it comes at the expense of really deserving, films and people. In terms of what didn't work for me,
is that she.
Sorry, in terms of what didn't work for me, honestly, I'll just be brief, and I'll say nothing. Like I actually just I kind of love this thing top to bottom.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I don't really have no notes, quite honestly.
Little sidebar. She did get a nom. What I was referencing before is I screwed up that her talking about, like, she was talking about Barbie getting nominated for Best Picture. So Greta Gerwig was like, but she's also been nominated for Best Director before.
Oh, good.
She was nominated for Lady Bird, her first film, for Best Director. But what was interesting was at that point, she was the first woman in 8 years to be nominated, and one of only 5 women in Oscar history up to that point who'd been nominated for Best Director. And that was the 90th Academy Awards. So in 90 years of the Academy Awards, 5 women had been nominated to that point for Best Director. So
not great.
Boys Club indeed. All right. So with all that being said, you said, you know, there's no, for me, I don't know if there was much that didn't quite work for me, to be completely honest. I found myself wanting more and enjoying it as the movie went on. And I was like, oh, what's next? Like, oh, this is exciting. And like, I love musicals, and I love like when they, you know, the dance, the dream ballet, you know, she references the Nutcracker. Like Greta Gerwig loved the Nutcracker and was like, I want a dance, like, studio set, like the dance off right in the middle of the Ken battle and the Ken song. They go into that kind of that whole dance performance, which is just like on that white background and the black. It's just like, oh man, this is so fun. And it's so cool.
Absolutely.
And, not a lot really didn't work for me. So in saying all that, we've talked about a lot of stuff here today, coming up in an hour. I have to know, David, I feel like I might already know, but just to be certain, for you, does Barbie take everything to be a hell of a picture for you? Will you turn your key, David, and make Barbie a hell of a picture for you?
Yes, absolutely. It not just tick the boxes, it created new criteria, because it did something so totally different from anything that we've watched so far, from anything that I've seen, really, period. And I can't get over the ambition, the originality, and the ingenuity of the film. How smart it is, how funny it is. Yeah, man. It's a hell of a picture. Let's go get some dinner.
Well, you still need me to turn my key.
I do.
I mean,
but I don't have to. You don't have to. You're your own person, Andrew. You have agency. I will not dictate to you what is a hell of a picture. I will express my views and appreciate yours.
There we go. We have learned something today, but I wouldn't be wearing pink with pink sunglasses if I didn't think this was warranted. I'm turning the key, man. This is blasting off to outer space. This is a hell of a picture. And, you know, it's funny for me, like you said, watching this back to back with Oppenheimer, I'm like, I turned my key for Oppenheimer. You did not consider it a hell of a picture because we need both of us. I still would turn my key for Oppenheimer, but in thinking about the larger scale of kind of where this lies, and especially with them coming out side by side. And as I was just saying, with I haven't seen a bunch of the films from last year. And I should have, especially a film like Zone of Interest, which I've just heard amazing things about and I want to see, and could be my favorite film of that last year. I mean, I think this over Killers. I love Killers of the Flower Moon. I loved Oppenheimer, but I think this is my favorite movie from last year, or maybe one of my favorite movies from the past few years. And I think in keeping with some of the criteria for our hell of a picture, man, I'm gonna go back and watch this. This was a movie that it ended last night, and I was like, man, I only watched this once for the podcast. I really wish I watched it twice. I want to go back and watch it again. It's so much fun, and I feel like I'm going to take more from it the second time, third time, fourth time.
And so memorable.
And I think this is
just scenes and moments that so I would just I can quote to you already and picture in my head. It all crystallized so quick, and love it.
And I'm so excited to see what going to do next. Greta Gerwig. She's apparently, from her Wikipedia, she's doing Snow White next, which will be an interesting adaptation. So film is directed, but it says she's writing it, which is very
so it's also going to be a satire. That would be fantastic if she just totally subverts the entire world's expectations for Snow White. I would love that.
Yeah, it's a live action adaptation of the film, of the animated film. So that'll be interesting. That's coming out till next year. But I wish I had sort of she's directed 3 movies now, Little Women and Lady Bird, and I've seen both of them, and I wish I had kind of gone off of what I thought about those other movies and gone to see Barbie, because I would have seen it in theaters. Greta Gerwig is definitely one of my favorite filmmakers working today, and I'm so excited to see what she does next, because I think it's going to be great, because I don't think she has missed so far. So with that being said, we're gonna keep the Gerwig train rolling, and we're gonna do, instead of looking at movies from the start, middle to now, we're looking at now Barbie. Let's go back a few years to Greta Gerwig's second film, Little Women. And we're going to talk about Little Women next week. I've seen it. David, you have not.
I have not. I have certainly not seen this adaptation, this iteration of the story. I'm really excited. This is my first Greta Gerwig experience. Man, what a delight, and I'm really excited to explore her filmography, continuing, I should say, next week with Little Women. Yeah, and man, she's only 40. She's a year older than us. She was born in 82. So we've got a lot of Gerwig to come. A lot of prime Gerwig to look forward to.
Yeah, I know, and I'm going to look forward to it, because she's a great filmmaker. So we're going to do Little Women next week, which is sort of no, because we did Jurassic Park. That was an adaptation.
Jaws,
she wrote Little Women, this adaptation.
Yeah, Jaws was also a novel adaptation.
A book.
Oppenheimer was too, actually. Oppenheimer was the life and times or the trials and.
So the majority of
basically unknowingly we have
the majority of our but Little Women has been adapted a ton before, both for like miniseries and movies, and obviously it's the book has been around for forever. So we're gonna dive into that and see what she kind of brings to the table with this adaptation, which is very unique and interesting and different, and definitely worth looking into. So anything else to add to this until head to the beach? I'm up for it. Let's grab our that's right. Let's go jump into that fake water on the horizon. Let's go crash into that styrofoam wave that that we both need to ride. Let's do it. Amazing. All right, brother. So for David Hollingsworth, I'm Andrew Bartlett, and we see you guys all next week, where we're gonna tackle Little Women.
Not literally. We will not be tackling Little Women. That would be a horrible thing to do. We will be discussing the film and not assaulting anyone.
Good plan.
Yeah.
Good
Safer.
follow-up.
You know what? I'm going to say
until next week. Yeah. This has been a hell of a picture.